Picture this, Beverly Hills, 1993. The lobby of the Four Seasons is packed with producers in Armani suits and Oscar winners sipping whiskey. Somewhere near the grand piano, Clint Eastwood stands alone, stone-faced, eyes narrowed, arms crossed. Across the room, a rising young actor is holding court, laughing, name-dropping, telling a story that ends with a cheap impersonation of the old cowboy director. Everyone chuckles except Clint. He doesn't say a word, just finishes his drink, tosses a nod to the bartender, and walks out the door without looking back. No confrontation, no scene, just silence, and the kind of silence that's final. For years, people whispered about that moment. What was said? What did Clint hear? Why did that actor's name disappear from Warner Brothers casting sheets soon after? No one ever knew because Clint Eastwood didn't explain. He didn't rant or tweet or give tabloid sound bites. He just vanished people quietly, coldly, permanently. But now, the silence is breaking. At 94, the legend is finally letting his guard down, and in a few rare moments of unscripted honesty, a pattern has emerged. 5 names, 5 celebrities Clint Eastwood never forgave, the ones who insulted him, disrespected his vision, or simply made the fatal mistake of thinking he'd forgotten. They didn't just clash with a filmmaker, they crossed a man who lived by a code and never backed down. First on that list is a documentary firestarter who tried to make a name for himself by mocking Clint's principles. Clint didn't laugh, didn't respond, he just made sure it never happened again. Michael Moore, the documentary showdown, started with a joke, or at least, Michael Moore thought it was a joke. In 2005, during a National Board of Review Awards event, Clint Eastwood took the stage and dropped a line that silenced the laughter. Michael Moore and I actually have a lot in common, we both appreciate documentaries. But if he ever shows up at my front door with a camera, I'll kill him. The audience chuckled nervously, a few gasped. Clint didn't flinch. He didn't follow it up with a grin, didn't give the room an out. The tension lingered in the air like gunpowder. This wasn't stand-up, it was a warning. Clint had just drawn a verbal line in the sand, one Moore never dared to cross again. The roots of this cold animosity stretched deeper than just one offhand comment. Moore had been making waves with his documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, a blistering takedown of the Bush administration and American military actions post 9/11. It won awards, made headlines, and infuriated Clint. To Eastwood, who had grown up revering World War II heroes and honoring quiet service, Moore's work felt like a cheap shot wrapped in self-promotion. He didn't view it as criticism, he viewed it as betrayal. It hit close to home because by then, Clint wasn't just an actor, he was a director, a storyteller, a man who had just finished $1 Million Baby and was about to release Flags of Our Fathers. His films explored American identity, sacrifice, and pain, not for headlines but for history. Michael Moore, in Clint's eyes, wasn't documenting truth, he was exploiting it. The two never collaborated, never even stood in the same frame again. And if you asked Clint about him today, he'd probably raise an eyebrow, grunt once, and change the subject. Because Eastwood doesn't believe in public feuds, he believes in quiet erasure. But Moore wasn't the only filmmaker who tested Clint's patience. The next one he took it even further, accusing Clint of whitewashing history on a global stage, and Clint Eastwood didn't just push back, he fired back. Spike Lee, The Battle Over History. Clint Eastwood rarely talks back, but in 2008, he made an exception, and it wasn't pretty. When Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima hit theaters, critics hailed Eastwood's ambitious double feature, one film from the American perspective, the other from the Japanese. It was raw, grim, honest. But to Spike Lee, something major was missing. He publicly accused Clint of erasing Black Marines from the story of Iwo Jima, calling out the lack of representation in Flags of Our Fathers. Many African Americans gave their lives, Spike said, you can't ignore that. Clint was livid. He didn't respond with nuance or press diplomacy, he fired back with something that sounded more like a Western threat, a guy like him should shut his face. It wasn't just defensive, it was explosive. Headlines caught fire. Spike didn't hold back either, I'm not going to shut up. He sounds like an angry old man. For days, the feud hijacked entertainment news. Two filmmaking titans, one the traditionalist cowboy, the other the modern provocateur, squared off in a war of words that exposed Hollywood's deepest fault lines. And while many tried to mediate or interpret the fallout, Clint never clarified his remarks. That silence said everything. To Eastwood, the story of Iwo Jima was about a specific group of soldiers. He wasn't interested in checking boxes, he was interested in telling his story the way he saw it. And he wasn't going to let anyone dictate his art. But Spike saw it differently. He believed Clint had a responsibility to tell the full story of history, especially when lives were lost in silence. For two men as proud, principled, and stubborn as Eastwood and Lee, compromise was never an option. They haven't spoken since. They don't attend the same events. They don't appear on the same panels. Neither has acknowledged the other's legacy, at least not publicly. But if you thought Clint only clashed with fellow directors, think again. Because his next feud happened on his own movie set, with one of the most famous actors in the world, an actor who tried to test Clint's patience and lost, Leonardo DiCaprio. Method versus gunslinger. They were two icons from two different eras, Leonardo DiCaprio, the intense, emotionally charged method actor, and Clint Eastwood, the grizzled, no-nonsense filmmaker who valued speed, silence, and control. When Eastwood cast DiCaprio in 2011's J. Edgar, Hollywood buzzed. It was the ultimate collision of old school and new school. But behind the scenes, that collision turned into a quiet storm. From day one, the friction was palpable. Clint was famous for his one-take directing style, minimal rehearsal, limited setup, shoot and move on. It was efficient, instinctual, and the polar opposite of how DiCaprio operated. Leo liked to explore, wanted multiple takes, asked questions, dove into emotional layers. While DiCaprio searched for subtlety, Clint was already calling cut. Move on. Crew members whispered about the tension. One insider said it was like watching a racehorse try to run in cowboy boots. There were no screaming matches, no walkouts, but the energy on set was tense. Two master craftsmen with wildly different approaches locked in a silent struggle over how a story should be told. DiCaprio did his best to adapt. Clint didn't budge. The film got made, it was released, and then, silence. No second collaboration, no warm praise in interviews, no shout-outs during awards season. Clint, who frequently reuses actors he admires like Morgan Freeman and Bradley Cooper, never called Leo again. Some say it was creative incompatibility. Others believe Clint saw DiCaprio as high-maintenance, theatrical, even egotistical. Whatever the case, their professional paths split like a cracked lens, and Eastwood never looked back. But while DiCaprio may have challenged Clint's control behind the camera, the next name on the list did something far worse. He mocked Eastwood's legacy in front of the entire world and got away with it, or so he thought. Seth Rogen, the sniper insult that Clint never forgot. Some actors made quiet enemies. Seth Rogen made his loud. In 2014, Clint Eastwood released American Sniper, a biographical war drama about Navy SEAL Chris Kyle. The film polarized critics but shattered box office records and stirred a cultural firestorm. For many, it was a tribute to military service. But for Rogen, it was something else entirely. Just days after its release, Rogen took to Twitter with a jab that left jaws on the floor. American Sniper kind of reminds me of the movie that's showing in the third act of Inglourious Bastard, the one where the Nazi sniper is killing allies. He didn't mention Clint by name, he didn't have to. The implication was nuclear. Comparing Eastwood's film to Nazi propaganda. And though Rogen insisted it was just a joke, the damage had already been done. Clint Eastwood didn't tweet back. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't say a word. Because Clint doesn't do social media battles, he does silence, ice-cold silence. Behind closed doors, insiders say Eastwood was livid, not just because of the insult, but because it was public. It wasn't a debate, it was a hit and run. To Clint, it wasn't just disrespectful, it was cowardly. And while Rogen would later backpedal, saying he wasn't calling American Sniper Nazi propaganda, the apology never reached Clint's ears or his heart. Eastwood never mentioned Rogen again. Never worked with him. And reportedly made it clear to close collaborators, if Rogen's name ever showed up on a casting list, it better disappear fast. Because if there's one thing Clint Eastwood doesn't tolerate, it's being disrespected by someone who thinks everything is a joke. But this next name, this final name, wasn't a comedian or a political loudmouth. He was Clint's peer, his equal, his co-star. Their feud brewed in total silence until one unforgettable film nearly blew it all wide open. Gene Hackman, the rival he couldn't direct on screen. They were electric off-screen. They barely spoke. In 1992, Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman joined forces for Unforgiven, a film that redefined the Western and swept the Oscars. It looked like a flawless collaboration between two giants. But behind the stoic performances was a slow-burning storm. Clint was known for running a tight, respectful set. He valued control, quiet, and trust. Hackman, however, was unpredictable, fiery, and famously combative. While Eastwood gave his actors freedom, he expected discipline. Hackman brought heat, too much of it. From the very first week of filming, there were whispers of trouble. Hackman didn't take notes easily. He'd interrupt Clint's instructions, challenge blocking, push for line rewrites. It wasn't rebellion, it was pride. One assistant recalled a moment during a pivotal scene where Hackman paused mid-take, turned to Clint, and said, "That line doesn't work." "I'm not saying it." Clint didn't argue. He simply stared, then with a soft but deadly tone replied, "You will?" It wasn't yelling, it was final. Tension hung over the rest of the shoot like a desert storm cloud. They never argued in front of the crew, but their silences said more than words ever could. Mutual respect, sure. Mutual affection? Not a trace. After Unforgiven, both men walked away with gold statues, but that was the last time they ever walked onto the same set. Clint never invited Hackman back. Never cited him as a favorite collaborator. And when asked about the film years later, he'd mention Morgan Freeman, he'd mention Richard Harris, but rarely, if ever, Hackman. Industry insiders believed the respect was real, but the relationship was unsalvageable, too much ego, too much friction. And in Clint's world, that means only one thing, one and done. Hackman would retire from acting not long after. Eastwood continued on, carefully curating who he brought into his circle. Because for Clint Eastwood, chemistry isn't about fame, it's about trust. And once that's broken, even by a fellow legend, it's over. Two icons, one unforgettable film, and a wall of silence that never cracked. Because when Clint Eastwood closes a door, it stays shut. The silence of the gunslinger. Clint Eastwood never needed to shout to make a statement. He didn't throw tantrums, didn't air dirty laundry in interviews. He just watched, waited, and when someone crossed the line, he didn't fire back, he cut them out quietly, permanently. In Hollywood, where reputations are built on charm and collaboration, Clint built his legacy on something else entirely, unwavering conviction. These five celebrities learned the hard way that working with Eastwood wasn't just a job, it was a test of respect, discipline, and knowing when to keep your ego in check. Some failed it spectacularly. So now the question is yours. Do you think Clint was right to stay silent, or did some of these grudges go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. And if you want more untold truths from the golden age of Hollywood, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because for every name Clint Eastwood couldn't stand, there's another he quietly admired, and we'll be revealing those very soon.